This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube. Just under 500,000 subscribers, so please subscribe if you're not a subscriber. Lots of good content coming, including lots of retro footage, such as this retro footage I obtained from RF Video of a classic interview with Billy Jack Haynes done in 2006. Now, since I've done many interviews with Billy Jack and I knew him pretty well the last 5 or 6 years before he was arrested for allegedly murdering his wife, a bunch of you guys, since I've been posting the clips from this interview on the Hannibal TV, have been asking me, can you do a commentary about this interview, which is about 4 hours long in full length, 3.5, 4 hours long. Everyone's commenting how healthy he looks in this. He does look much healthier. At various points he says he has, I believe, Vitakin on him in the interview. He even offers one of the people in the room Vitakin while he's doing the interview. He At one point the interview stops and they go to a convention and then they come back and finish the interview. It's clear that he's definitely obtained something during the break, during the time he was at the convention before they finished the interview, because I think this was done at the convention hotel. uh he takes off his suit that he's in, and he's in like a cut off shirt. And it definitely seems like he's on something for the last part of the interview. He's acting very animated. He does a hell of a Roddy Piper impression. He's talking way more, way more. He's shooting, let's just say, way more on people than he was before. One interesting thing about this, it's funny because I asked him about this before he went in jail. Just before he went in jail, he was going to do an interview with me and address this because I'd been reading a Retro Wrestling Observer newsletter where it talked about Lex Luger showing up to a convention so messed up that he thought Billy Jack Haynes was Macho Man and he was apologizing, allegedly, according to this Wrestling Observer newsletter. You guys can look it up if you want. He was apologizing to Macho Man for Elizabeth's death. But he was so messed up that he thought Billy Jack Haynes was Macho Man, according to this report. And it's funny because Billy Jack had confirmed this to me on the phone, and we were going to do another interview covering this. But then he ultimately ended up killing his wife. And that interview never happened. But he talked about it because that incident happened at that convention that took place the day that he was doing this interview. He's definitely more with it in this interview than he is in later years. During my interviews, he's way more just, I think a good way to describe Billy Jack is he's delusional. And he's a good storyteller. I don't know how much of it is straight up lying or how much of it is actually believing he's done some of the stuff that he talks about. But there was definitely conflicting stories in here to what he's told me in other interviews. Very conflicting stories and very different opinions on certain people in between this interview and the interviews he did with me 15 years later, when he hadn't necessarily had much interaction with any of these people in those 15 years in between. One thing that's kind of a bombshell in this that I never heard him tell me, but he does show pictures of it in this, where he was beaten nearly to death. These are hospital pictures he shows where he looks basically like Frankenstein, where he says he was set up and beat up by a group of people. And this was related to what he claimed was related to drug dealing, I guess, drug dealing money. But again, I really don't know how much of what Billy Jack says is real or not, because even his stories about working for Pablo Escobar, which I don't believe he ever worked directly for Pablo Escobar. His stories of how he got into drug dealing and the level of drug dealing he was in differ in these days than in interviews he's done with me. Because in interviews he's done with me, he was acting like he was doing this the entire time he was in WWE and wrestling before that. And with their crazy travel schedule, you just couldn't have been a drug mule on the side of working a WWE travel schedule. And which he even says in this, some weeks in WWE when he was teaming with Hogan, he was making up to 19,000 a week. So why would you even need to be a drug mule and risk yourself so much if you're like making 19,000 a week legitimately? It doesn't even make sense. He definitely self-sabotaged himself in his career. He was given pushes pretty much everywhere he went. Uh, but he didn't handle the pushes right, and he got mad for various reasons and blew his chances. He was easy to aggravate, easy to agitate. He does claim he has a whole history of being abused. I can imagine he probably didn't have an easy life. And I don't know enough information to know what's true or not. He's a conspiracy theorist in this somewhat, but not as bad as he was in later years. He does tell a story in this that supposedly Crush at one point, Brian Adams, set him up to have a WWE tryout that never existed around 92 or 93 in Texas. And he drove from Portland to this tryout and it never happened. And he said he wanted to get a gun from his car and shoot Hulk Hogan, but he was talked down by Hercules and some other wrestler. Which, as that's interesting that he says that, considering he ended up shooting his wife. I just don't see that stories like that would have happened without it being known more. Because, like, I mean, Billy Jack Haynes trying to shoot Hulk Hogan in '92, that would have been a huge story. And I don't know, it's even questionable whether or not Hercules was in WWE at that point in '92 or not, because I know he was released sometime very early in '92. He also claimed he showed up at a WCW event in Florida. Some fans were saying likely Slamboree '95, if it did happen at the Bayfront Center, and challenged Hulk Hogan to a fight, which I just can't see him being let that close to Hulk Hogan to do that in '95. In '95, he was so far off everybody's radar that I just can't see him being let into the Bayfront Center dressing room of Hulk Hogan. It just doesn't seem like that's anything that could happen. He does talk about working for Jerry Jarrett when Jerry Jarrett had a deal with WWE and he wasn't getting paid anything compared to what the WWE guys were making in Memphis at the time, but he was working with the WWE guys a lot and he ended up leaving Memphis too. It's too bad because if he had shown a better attitude around that time, he was doing good heel work and he still was in good shape. He probably could have worked his way back in there. But because he was focusing so much on the negative and how much less he was making in the short term and not looking at the big picture, that was another case where what did he do? Was it smart what he did? Leave Memphis and then, according to his story, go back to Portland and become a drug dealer? I don't know. I don't know what to believe and what not to believe with him. I don't sympathize with him for killing his wife. I really don't. I have no sympathy with him over that. I don't. I think he's delusional, and anything that he says about his reason for killing his wife should be taken with a grain of salt. Because I've also heard from the wife's family, and the wife's family told me they were trying to get custody of her, and he was blocking it somehow. But at the same time, he did talk about how much he loved her, but he certainly never talked to me ever. And he was talking to me a lot. Right up until the end, he called me the day he killed her. The police even called me and talked to me about it. And I wish I would have answered the phone that day. But he never mentioned anything about any suicide pact ever with her. So I just find the whole situation weird. He's delusional. He's in a mental hospital right now, considering he killed his wife and obviously had access to guns, and talks in this very interview about having thoughts of killing other people before. I truly believe he is in the right place in a mental hospital right now, because I don't think it's safe for anyone for him to be in society if he can get a hold of guns, and he's as delusional as he is. I do miss. I mean, I miss talking to him in some ways, because this reminded me of he has a nice side. He has a charming side. He has a kind of a lovable side to him. So watching this interview kind of reminded me of the nice side of him. I knew he cared a lot about me and considered me one of his close friends. They truly should have used me for his Dark Side of the Ring documentary, but just like Billy Graham, even though I was very, very close to both of them, they didn't want my opinion for whatever reason. But Billy Jack and I were very close. Again, for killing his wife, he is where he deserves to be, and it's really too bad that happened. But for the people that are watching this saying, "Oh my God, he's so much more together in this," he is together as if he's not going fully crazy in this, but he is telling a lot of stories that I don't necessarily believe are true in this. And he made bad decisions his whole life, sadly. It's too bad, because he could have been one of the biggest stars of all time in wrestling. He still is, other than Piper, maybe the biggest homegrown Portland star of all time and the most notorious for sure. I understand that he's popular in the jail. He's not having any problems in the jail, as far as like no one's harassing him or anything. And now he's in a mental hospital, so it might even be even better. But at least he's not like being beat up every day, or anything like that, because as tough as he once was, I know he had a lot of health issues before he went in jail, physical health issues, and and I was falsely put in jail that I got exonerated on the charges from once myself, and I know how rough jail can be from my terrible experience being in one, wrongly being in one for 3.5 weeks at one point. So I'm glad he's not being picked on or harassed or beat up in jail. And sadly, I think he's in the right place for the protection of himself and society. And truly one of the saddest stories ever in professional wrestling. I don't think he's an evil person, but he's just not mentally there enough to be able to take care of himself these days. How much of that was always there? How much was aggravated from concussions? I don't know, but I'm glad he's somewhere where he is getting some form of help, and we don't have to worry about him getting into situations where he's beat up so bad he looks like Frankenstein, or he gets killed, or anyone else dies. So thinking about you, buddy, but it's really too bad you didn't talk about this more with me. You may have been trying to talk about it with me that morning that you called me, and I'm sorry that I wasn't there for you that day, if that's what you were calling me about. And I'm sorry for everything you're going through, and I'm sorry for everything that happened to your wife and the wife's